When I saw her standing there, my heart stopped. She was only 8 years old, small, quiet, and holding a backpack that looked too heavy for her thin shoulders. People rushed past her without noticing, rolling their suitcases, talking on their phones, living their lives. But she didn't move. She just stood there, eyes searching every face, waiting for someone who never came. I recognized her immediately. My granddaughter. For a moment, my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I told myself there must be a mistake. Maybe her parents were nearby. Maybe she had wandered a few steps away. But as seconds passed and panic began to rise in her eyes, a terrible truth settled into my chest. She was alone. I rushed toward her, my legs weak, my heart pounding painfully. When she saw me, her face crumpled in relief, and she ran into my arms as if she had been holding herself together with nothing but hope. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice shaking, "they told me to wait here." Those words broke something inside me. I knelt down and held her tightly, feeling her small body trembling. I asked her where her parents were, why she was alone, why no one was answering their phones. She shook her head, confused and frightened. All she knew was that she had been told to wait. And so she did, because children trust. They believe. They wait. As I looked around the crowded airport, anger slowly replaced my shock. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. Someone had made a choice. A choice to walk away from a child who still believed the world was safe. And in that moment, standing under the harsh airport lights with my granddaughter clinging to me, I knew one thing with painful certainty. This was only the beginning of a story that would change our lives forever. I took her to a quiet corner of the airport, far away from the noise and rushing crowds. I sat her down gently and wrapped my shawl around her small shoulders. Only then did I truly see how tired she was. Her eyes were red, not just from crying, but from trying so hard to stay brave. Children should never have to be brave like that. Not at 8 years old. I asked her softly how long she had been standing there. She shrugged at first, unsure, then said she didn't know. She told me she had watched people come and go, planes land and take off, announcements echo through the building again and again. She had been afraid to move because her father had told her very clearly, "Stay right here. Don't go anywhere." So she listened. She stayed. She waited. As she spoke, my chest tightened with every word. She explained that earlier that day, everything had seemed normal. They had driven to the airport together. Her small suitcase was packed, and she was excited, thinking this was just another trip. She trusted her parents completely. Why wouldn't she? They were her world. But once inside the terminal, things changed. Her father became quiet. Her stepmother barely spoke to her at all. They walked her to a bench near the gates. Her father knelt in front of her, smiled in a way that felt forced, and told her they needed to take care of something quickly. He promised they would be right back. He told her to stay put, to be a good girl, and to wait. And then they disappeared. At first she wasn't scared. She told me she believed them. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. She watched every face, expecting to see them walking back toward her. Each time footsteps came closer, her heart lifted, only to sink again when it wasn't them. Slowly, excitement turned into confusion. Confusion turned into fear. She said she wanted to cry, but she was afraid of getting in trouble for leaving her spot. She didn't want to be bad. Hearing that nearly destroyed me. Even in fear, she was worried about obeying the rules they had given her. That is how deep a child's trust runs. As she spoke, I felt anger rise inside me like fire. What kind of parent does this? What kind of person walks away from their own child in a place so cold, so overwhelming, so full of strangers? This wasn't just neglect. It was abandonment. And no excuse in the world could justify it. I asked her if anyone had spoken to her, if any staff had tried to help. She shook her head. She said she was too scared to talk to anyone. She didn't know who was safe. She just waited, because that's what she had been told to do. I pulled her close and held her, feeling the weight of her small body against mine. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from rage and heartbreak combined. I kept thinking about how easily something terrible could have happened. How vulnerable she had been. How invisible children can become in crowded places when no one is looking out for them. I tried calling her father's phone. Straight to voicemail. Again and again. No answer. My anger hardened into something colder, sharper. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. They had chosen a new life, a new beginning, and they had decided she no longer fit into it. As I sat there, holding my granddaughter in that airport, I felt something shift inside me. This was no longer just about comforting a frightened child. This was about protecting her. About standing between her and a world that had already failed her once. I looked at her tear-streaked face and made a silent promise. Whatever it took, I would not let her feel abandoned again. I didn't yet know how difficult the road ahead would be. I didn't know how much this would change my life. But one thing was clear. They had walked away from her. I would not. Holding her there in that crowded airport, I felt the weight of a decision pressing down on me. One I never imagined I would have to make. My granddaughter had finally stopped crying, but her small body was still tense, as if she didn't dare relax. Every announcement over the loudspeaker made her flinch. Every group that walked past made her look up, hoping and fearing at the same time. I stroked her hair slowly, whispering to her that she was safe now, even though part of me was still trying to convince myself of the same thing. I knew I couldn't just walk out of the airport as if nothing had happened. This was serious. A child had been abandoned, whether her parents wanted to admit it or not. I stood up, holding her hand tightly, and approached the nearest airport security desk. My voice shook as I explained what I had found, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had to be strong, for her. The officers listened carefully, their expressions changing as I spoke. They asked her gentle questions, kneeling down to her level, speaking in soft voices so they wouldn't scare her. She answered quietly, clutching my hand the entire time. When they asked where her parents were, she looked at me with confusion in her eyes, as if asking why they hadn't come back yet. That look nearly broke me. Airport security contacted child services immediately. Hearing those words made my stomach twist. I never imagined my family would be in a situation like this. It felt like crossing a line that could never be undone. But deep down, I knew this wasn't about pride or appearances anymore. This was about doing what was right. While we waited, I tried calling her father again. This time, the phone rang longer before going to voicemail. Still no answer. My hands clenched around the phone, anger burning through me. How could he ignore call after call, knowing his child was alone somewhere? Or worse, knowing exactly where she was and choosing not to come back? Hours passed slowly. Someone brought my granddaughter a juice and a small snack. She ate quietly, glancing at me every few seconds as if afraid I might disappear too. Each glance tightened my heart. No child should live with that kind of fear. Finally, child services arrived. A kind woman sat with us, listening carefully as I explained everything again. She didn't rush me. She didn't judge. She simply listened, and that alone felt like relief. She told me gently that what had happened was considered abandonment, and that they needed to ensure the child's immediate safety. That was the moment the full reality hit me. There was a chance they might take her away, to a temporary shelter, to strangers, while they sorted things out. The thought made my chest ache. My granddaughter looked up at me, eyes wide, sensing something was wrong. She squeezed my hand harder. "Grandma, you're not leaving me, right?" she asked in a trembling voice. I knelt in front of her, holding her face gently in my hands, forcing a smile through my tears. "No," I told her softly. "I'm right here." Without hesitation, I told the caseworker that she could stay with me, permanently if needed. I didn't think about my age, my health, or how difficult it might be. In that moment, there was only one thing that mattered. She needed someone who would not walk away. The caseworker looked at me carefully, asking if I understood what I was offering. I nodded. I understood more than she could know. I had already lost too much time believing others would do the right thing. I would not make that mistake again. As night fell outside the airport windows, I held my granddaughter close, knowing that our lives had just taken a sharp turn. I didn't know what battles lay ahead, legal, emotional, or otherwise. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. When everyone else chose to leave, I chose to stay. And that choice would change everything. That night unfolded in a way I will never forget. As if time itself had slowed down to make sure every moment carved itself into my memory. After hours at the airport, filled with questions, paperwork, and concerned faces, we finally left under the dim glow of streetlights. My granddaughter sat quietly beside me, her head resting against my arm, exhaustion weighing her down. She didn't speak much, but every so often she would glance up at me, as if checking to make sure I was still there. Each glance felt like a promise I had to keep. When we reached my home, I moved slowly, aware of how fragile she felt. How fragile we both were. I prepared something warm for her to eat, watching as she took small bites, her body finally beginning to relax. It was in those quiet moments that the reality of everything truly settled in. This was no longer an emergency that would pass by morning. This was our new life, beginning without warning and without preparation. Later, as I tucked her into bed, she asked questions I didn't know how to answer. "Why didn't they come back?" she whispered. "Did I do something wrong?" Those words pierced my heart deeper than anything else that day. I sat beside her, holding her hand, and told her the truth as gently as I could. That none of this was her fault. That adults sometimes make choices that hurt others, and that she was loved more than she could understand. Even as I spoke, I wondered how long it would take before she truly believed it. After she fell asleep, I sat alone in the quiet house, the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. My body was tired, my mind overwhelmed, yet sleep would not come. I thought about the years ahead, school, healing, legal battles, unanswered questions. I worried about whether I was strong enough, whether my age would work against me. But beneath all that fear was a steady resolve. I had stepped into this role not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. The next morning brought more reality. Phone calls, appointments, forms to fill out. Child services needed statements, timelines, proof that I could care for her. Each question felt invasive, but I understood their purpose. They needed to know she was safe. And for the first time since that terrible moment at the airport, I felt something close to relief knowing someone else finally recognized how serious this was. As the day went on, fragments of anger began to surface. Anger at the parents who walked away. Anger at a system that reacts only after damage is done. But I didn't let that anger consume me. I couldn't afford to. My granddaughter needed calm, stability, reassurance. She needed to see that at least one adult in her life would stand firm. By the end of that day, as she sat coloring quietly at the table, I watched her closely. The fear in her eyes hadn't disappeared, but it had softened. And in that small change I saw hope. The night had made one thing painfully clear. Our lives had changed forever. But it had also shown me something just as powerful. From this moment on, she would never be alone again. In the days that followed, our routine began to take shape in small, careful steps. Nothing felt normal yet, but structure slowly replaced chaos. I woke her up each morning with gentle words and a warm breakfast, trying to bring back the sense of safety she had lost so suddenly. She moved quietly at first, always watching me, always needing reassurance that I was still there. I didn't mind. If my presence could calm her fears, I would give it freely. At night, she struggled the most. She would wake up from bad dreams, calling out softly, her body trembling. I learned to keep my door open, the hallway light on, so she could see me anytime she needed. Sometimes she would crawl into my bed without saying a word, curling up beside me as if afraid sleep might take her somewhere unsafe again. I held her and reminded her, again and again, that she was home. There were moments when she asked about her parents. Not with anger, but with confusion. She wanted to understand why they left, why they hadn't come back. I chose my words carefully, never speaking with bitterness, never placing blame on her shoulders. I told her that some adults make selfish choices, but that those choices had nothing to do with her worth. Each time I said it, I hoped the message would sink a little deeper. Behind the calm I tried to show her, I was fighting my own battles. Calls from social workers continued. Legal processes moved slowly, painfully slowly. Every form I filled out felt like proof of how badly she had been failed. I worried constantly about my health, my finances, my ability to give her everything she deserved. But every time doubt crept in, I looked at her and reminded myself why I was doing this. I began attending meetings, sitting across from people who spoke in careful, professional tones. They asked whether I was prepared for long-term responsibility, whether I understood the emotional needs of a child who had been abandoned. I answered honestly. I told them I didn't have all the answers, but I had love, patience, and commitment. And sometimes, that is what matters most. Slowly, changes appeared in her. She laughed again, softly at first, then more freely. She started talking about school, about friends she missed, about things she wanted to be when she grew up. Each laugh felt like a small victory, a sign that healing had begun. Watching her rediscover joy reminded me that pain does not erase hope. It just hides it for a while. One evening, as we sat together drawing at the kitchen table, she looked up at me and said, "Grandma, I feel safe here." Those simple words filled my eyes with tears. In that moment, I knew that whatever lay ahead, no matter how difficult, I had made the right choice. I didn't know what the future would look like. I only knew this. I had become her safe place, and I would protect that with everything I had. Just when our days were beginning to feel steadier, when her laughter no longer sounded cautious and my heart had started to believe we might be okay, the past found a way to reach us. It came quietly at first. Missed calls, unfamiliar numbers, messages left without details. I knew who they were from before I ever listened. My hands trembled as I held the phone, not from fear of confrontation, but from the worry of what their return might do to her fragile sense of safety. When the call finally came through, I answered with a calm I did not feel. Her father's voice sounded distant, almost careful, as if choosing the right words could erase what he had done. He spoke about misunderstandings, about things being more complicated than they looked. He said they hadn't meant to leave her like that. He asked how she was, then quickly shifted to how hard everything had been for them. I listened without interrupting, each word settling heavier in my chest than the last. What he never said mattered more than what he did. He never apologized, not truly. He never asked how his daughter had felt standing alone in that airport. He never acknowledged the fear he had carved into her small heart. When he finally asked to speak to her, I said no. Not out of anger, but out of protection. She was not ready. And more importantly, he had not earned that right. That decision wasn't easy. Part of me still carried the old instinct to keep peace, to smooth things over, to put family first at any cost. But I had learned something powerful since that day at the airport. Protecting a child sometimes means standing firm, even when it makes others uncomfortable. I told him that all communication would now go through proper channels. There was a long silence on the other end of the line before the call ended. The days after that were tense. I watched my granddaughter closely, afraid she would sense the shift. Children always do. One evening, she asked me quietly if her parents were angry with her. That question nearly broke me. I sat her down, looked her in the eyes, and told her the truth as gently as I could. That adults are responsible for their own choices, and that nothing she did caused this. I told her she was loved, and that love does not disappear just because someone makes a mistake. Still, I could see the doubt lingering in her eyes. That night, I lay awake thinking about how abandonment leaves marks that are not always visible. It teaches children to question their worth, to fear being left again. I promised myself I would spend as long as it took undoing that damage. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change what happened next. As weeks passed, the legal process continued. Meetings, evaluations, and quiet judgments filled my days. Some people looked at me with admiration, others with doubt, wondering if a woman my age could really raise a child again. I ignored the whispers. I had raised children before. More importantly, I understood what this child needed now. Consistency, honesty, and a love that did not vanish when things became inconvenient. Slowly, life found a rhythm again. Not the life we once had, but a new one, built on trust and small moments of joy. And though the past still hovered at the edges, it no longer controlled us. I had made my choice. No matter who came knocking, I would not let anyone take her sense of safety away again. As time passed, I began to see changes in her that filled me with both hope and responsibility. She started sleeping through the night more often, no longer waking up in panic or calling out in fear. Her shoulders relaxed. Her laughter became louder, more natural, no longer cautious. These small changes told me more than any report or evaluation ever could. She was healing. Slowly, carefully, she was learning to trust again. I made sure our days were predictable. Children who have been abandoned need consistency more than promises. Breakfast at the same time. School drop-offs with the same goodbye hug. Evenings spent talking about her day, her worries, her dreams. I listened closely, not just to her words but to what she didn't say. Whenever she hesitated or fell silent, I knew fear was still there, hiding beneath the surface. She began asking deeper questions, not just about her parents, but about families, about why some people stay and others leave. Those conversations were difficult. I chose honesty without cruelty. I told her that people are flawed, that some are not ready for responsibility, and that none of that was her fault. I repeated that message until I believed she truly heard it. At school, teachers noticed the change too. They told me she was doing better, participating more, smiling more. Still, there were days when she came home quiet, withdrawn. On those days I didn't push. I sat beside her, reminding her through presence alone that she didn't need to face anything by herself anymore. Meanwhile, the legal process continued in the background like a slow-moving storm. Papers arrived. Meetings were scheduled. Decisions were discussed. Each step felt heavy, but I stayed focused. I wasn't fighting out of anger. I was fighting for stability, for her future, for her right to feel safe. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in. I would look at myself in the mirror, at my tired eyes and aging hands, and wonder if I was enough. But then she would run toward me after school, arms wide, calling my name with joy, and every doubt would fade. Love does not measure age. It measures commitment. One evening, as we sat together reading before bed, she rested her head against my shoulder and said something that took my breath away. "Grandma," she whispered, "I don't feel scared anymore." I held her close, tears silently falling, knowing that those words were the greatest reward I could ever receive. I didn't know what the final outcome of everything would be. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew this much. The cycle of abandonment had ended here. With me. With the choice to stay, to protect, to love without conditions. And for the first time since I saw her standing alone in that airport, I allowed myself to believe that we were going to be okay. Looking back now, it feels unreal that our lives changed so completely in a single moment at an airport. One decision, one act of walking away, could have destroyed a child's sense of safety forever. But it also revealed something powerful. Love does not always come from those who are expected to give it. Sometimes, it comes from those who choose to stay when everyone else leaves. Our days are quieter now, filled with ordinary moments that once felt impossible. Morning routines, school lunches, bedtime stories, things many take for granted, have become the foundation of our healing. Each small routine is a reminder that stability can be rebuilt, even after deep betrayal. I watch her grow stronger, more confident and more trusting, and I am reminded daily why I made the choice I did. The pain of what happened has not vanished completely. There are still moments when questions resurface, when memories cast shadows over our happiness. But those moments no longer control us. We face them together, openly and honestly. I have learned that healing does not mean forgetting. It means learning how to live fully despite what was lost. I also learned something about myself through this journey. I discovered a strength I didn't know I still had. At a time in life when many are told to rest and step aside, I stepped forward. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Love called and I answered. The future remains uncertain, as it always is. But I no longer fear it. I know that whatever comes, she will not face it alone. And neither will I. We have built something new, something rooted in trust, honesty, and unconditional care. The promise I made to her that day at the airport still guides me. She will never be abandoned again. No matter how hard life becomes, no matter how many challenges we face, I will stand by her. Because family is not defined by who walks away. It is defined by who stays. And I am here,